Let's get into our demo now, all right? We're gonna go through 3 use cases. I'm gonna show you what it looks like in intake and requests flow. We're gonna use the check for information, and then I'm gonna hand it over to Brandon so you can stop listening to my voice and go through content creation. This is a workflow that we put together that's going to actually create blog content for you and emails for you based on submitted information. And we also have one that we're calling the process police, one that we're using to help teams stay on top of the work that they're doing. So before we get there, I'm going to switch over to Asana now. Drop it in the chat for me. I would love to know what's one workflow you'd love to automate in AI Studio. Think of that one that involves the most amount of people. It provides the most problems. There are gaps there. You're constantly trying to rework it, or there's clear space for optimization. Let's switch over. I've got my project here, okay? And what we have here is a creative requests and intake. This use case would be someone in our company is requesting assets, could be video, photography, images, copy, content, and they need the design team or the branding team to create that content. And so we would have a form. That person would submit a form. It would come in. Our manager, whether it's a product manager or a brand manager, would receive that request. And what happens next? Do we get to work on that? Do we start resourcing? But what we've experienced 9 times out of 10 is there isn't enough information, right? Even though we've asked all the questions, the responses are quite vague, and we have to go and chase that person down. We have to book a meeting with that individual, and we have to gather that information. And sometimes that can take days and weeks, thus delaying these campaigns and creation of these assets that were requested in the first place. So we're going to show you a use case for how we can overcome that. I'm going to go to my form up here. All right. The request type is going to be photography in this case. And the summary of my request, I'm just going to use natural language. We need new images for a global campaign. And then I can say, we are launching a new brand and we need images for a new campaign. So I'm going to be vague on purpose, but of course you could add in any amount of fields you have here. You could have the asset type, you could have the dimensions, you could add due dates to say when you need this by. But we see that even when you do that, there's still disalignment around what the deliverables actually are. And we need that time, we need that space with that person to gather that information. Okay. And so this, in any case, is working to eliminate that. I don't have any assets to share in this case. Anything else we need? I need this quickly, please, because we always need these things yesterday, right? So let's go and submit that. And it's going to come into our photography section. There it is right there. We need new images for a global campaign. I want you to just fix your eyes on that title for a second. What AI is doing right now is it's looking at the submission and it's doing a few things. It's got a few jobs. If you just saw it there, the first thing it has to do is rename the title of the task, right? So the request comes in, and rather than having it be the unformatted title that I gave it or the summary that I gave it, it's renamed it to request new images for global campaign. And we can see that right here where it's automatically renamed that task. All right. Now its second job is to check for missing information. So right now, it's working on that. It's checking for missing information because I've asked it to. So let's go and see the reasoning. So thoughts. This task lacks sufficient information on the photography project. While it mentions needing images for a global campaign, it does not provide critical details such as specific project goals, number of images needed, specific locations, right? We didn't give it that information. And so it knows that there's a problem, right? And it knows that it now has to intervene. Okay, so it's completed 2 jobs. First one was automatically renaming, and then the second was checking for missing information. Now it's working on its third job. I've asked it to create a comment that says to the submitter, right? Hi, Marquis, to help us process your photography request for the new brand's global campaign, could you please provide more details? What specific types of images are you looking for? Can you describe the key visual elements? What are the primary markets, right? And so this is feedback to possibly myself as the person owning this board to update my form to get more specific, or we could just leave it to AI, but it's also informing the submitter that, hey, you missed some steps here, right? We need more information from you. But it didn't just leave it at that. It's also gone a second step, and it's actually created a subtask for me. So it's assigned to me for today, provide additional details for global campaign photography. And when I click into that subtask, it's then gone and highlighted those same questions. So we need more info, describe specific visual requirements, outline key messaging, and so on. And so it's taken the job of, someone who would typically triage this, have to go track that person down, book the meeting, have the meeting, request the assets, wait for the assets to come back, reconfirm. And again, we're just cutting out all of that time now. And so I'm going to show you what happened briefly here in the backend. When we go into customize, we're going to go to rules here and add. And here are all the different options that you can select from. Okay, so if you want to try it out for yourself, it's available on your platform for free. There are different paid levels based on how frequently you're going to use it and how complex you need to get, but go ahead and try it today. And so I'm going to go into our check for missing information. And we've said that when a task is added to the project, we want to check that the task does not have sufficient information. So if it doesn't, then we want it to do a few things. We want it to add a comment in the task. And so what that looks like is we've selected the add a comment option. And rather than putting the comment in ourselves, we've said, AI, you figure it out. And then we've said, create a subtask. What do we want to call that subtask? AI, you figure it out. Then we go into edit, and in the description, right, rather than us saying what it's going to be, it's pulling context again from the submission, and we're saying AI, you figure it out. And so in order then to better guide it, we want to do a couple of things. First, we want to select our model. We have various models on the platform, everything as small as GPT-4o Mini from OpenAI to Claude 3.5 Haiku, O3 Mini from OpenAI, O1 from OpenAI, and we just got Claude Opus 4 and Sonnet 4 on the platform. We have GPT-4o as well as Claude 3.5. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, that's okay. We're choosing models because each of these models are specifically designed for certain tasks, right? So something like renaming a task or, creating a summary or creating subtasks can be used by a smaller model. If you were here last month, you would have seen my car analogy that if you need to, get from here to the store, you could take, a compact car or you could take a luxury vehicle. You're going to have to put more gas or better gas, I should say, in that premium vehicle to get to the same place when maybe you could have just taken the compact car with, 87 octane. And so the model will kind of determine how many credits you're using, and it's all determined on the inputs, so the instructions you're giving it, as well as what the output is, what you're expecting it to do on the other side. And so there are little descriptors below them. If you're unsure, again, test it out for yourself. But there is some flexibility in the models we can use. Last thing I'll show you here is the guidance, right? So we said that we want to use natural language here. We want to shape the output of this. And so in my guidance here, I said you are triaging incoming tasks to see if they have sufficient information for someone to work on. Tasks with sufficient information to be triaged will have a clear description of the work needed, a due date, relative time, whether this task depends on any other work. When you write your comment, this is how I want you to write said comment. When you create your subtask, this is how I want you to create said subtask. All right. If you did have any guidelines or policies and procedures, brand guidelines specifically, for maybe this example, You can attach those here. You can add a file, okay? It will then reference those files. You can link to your Google Drive. We could actually mention tasks in this or projects in this that we wanted it to reference as well. If there was information there that we needed it to glean, right? So we can give it all that information. And then in this case, we've given it access to the World Wide Web to do any research or planning for us. So these AI teammates are getting smarter. They're literally a click away, and they can be integrated into the work that we are doing every single day. So I hope that helped to give you an overview and a sample of what AI Studio can do for you in your work. I'm going to hand it over to Brandon, though, at this point to showcase some way cooler use cases that can't just be implemented by a little click here in the back end of Asana. So Brandon, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, you're not doing yourself justice there. That was a cool flow. I guess you're using the pre-built rules anyways. And so there's a lot more you can do. There's a lot of customization you can do. And we do a lot of demos for prospective clients here at Cirface for those who are looking at getting into work with us. And so we've built a lot on the back end to show all this different customization that we can do with AI Studio. And so I have a couple of examples that I want to show you. Here we are in Miro. Imagine you are a marketing department. Maybe you're creating content for your internal team, or maybe you're delivering work like campaigns for your clients. But in any case, let's just say that you work for a department that needs to create content of some sort. The flow I want to show you is how you can use AI to generate first drafts of that content. Of course, you can go on GPT and do that, but how can we do it all in one in Asana and also bake it into the workflow that you'll need to do so that you don't have to leave Asana to do it. It'll do it for you. And again, it'll be all baked into that step-by-step end-to-end process of creating content for campaigns. Here's a fake process where maybe you've got some form of starting point. Someone on your team needs a campaign done on some form of topic. And it's part of their process to have a human come in and send an input through, which is like a form submission, like you saw Marquis do in one of his previous examples. And the expected output from AI would be that like a brief gets generated from that for the team to work on. They can use it. The information can be extracted from that form submission, posted in the description of a task, and that's the home for your team to work on and create that stuff and collaborate and review AI stuff and all that kind of stuff. Maybe after that, you've got like a human coming in to review the AI's work and submit the rest of the information. So another input from your team where you're giving all the details you need to know, all the details the AI needs to know to confidently create your content drafts for you. And so the next step in this process would be an output where the AI could generate that content, and they'll do that for all the kinds of whatever it is you need for that campaign. So in this case, if it's a blog post and some email copy, it'll generate that and then go to the next step, which is like another human review or going live with it or whatever it might be. It's a pretty straightforward process. And so we've got a board here where that form can be submitted and that process can be started. And so imagine that I'm working in the sales department and I want a campaign to go out for us. So I reach out to the campaigns team and I say, my name is Brandon. I want a blog post and an email blast, delivered for this topic. And here is an attachment of my choosing in the format of my choosing with what I'm thinking, at least right now. It's like pretty basic and it's pretty simplified, but let's get something on here and get this process started. So I'll submit this and we'll see this show up in our pipeline. So you'll see that a form submission has been received and is now in the intake section. Similar to what you saw in one of Marquis' rules, I have a naming rule added here as well. So instead of it coming up as a general submission for some kind of content, you'll see in real time in the background, you might have just seen that we have a new name. And so we have the kind of content that we're doing. So what's the topic? And also the deliverables, a blog post and an email blast, and the timing. And so this is more of a custom naming rule, but in any case, it still works. It just saves your team the clicks. But you've already seen this, so let's get on to the next step. Maybe it's time to go to the next step where we want AI to generate a brief for us. Again, we have inputs. We want Asana to extract those inputs and give us a place to work from. So let's go ahead and move it to the next section where we have AI come in and draft a brief for us. So we'll just kind of watch this happen in real time because this should be relatively quick. And if you are wondering where to watch your AI think, make sure you go to the All Activity tab where you'll be able to see in real time it thinking through whether or not to run a rule or what it's checking for or any of that stuff. And so at some point, we'll see that come through here. The point of this is for it to update the description, and that has happened. And so now the description of this request is our brief. It's our campaign brief, and the information that it had was basically that I wanted a blog post and an email draft, and I submitted that attachment. That was, I think, a PDF form. So it extracted the information, and now it's in the description, and it's also created a subtask for me here at the bottom. And it basically says, let's get a human in here to review the brief, make sure it's good, and then provide all the other information that we'll need to actually create that content for you. Right now, we're at the human review point. And so we'll go ahead and we'll take a look at the subtask. We'll review our draft. If we like it, we'll go ahead and we'll check that off. And we'll attach whatever other information it is that they need to, again, create that content, create the blog post, or create the email copy. And so I'll go ahead and I'll upload that in whatever format you need. This could also be typed out, but in this case, I just assume that the process is some form of attachment. And so I have uploaded that, and we'll move on to the next step, which is draft creation. And so we want the AI to draft the content for us. So we move it into the next step, and it's going to start running and working in the background. This might take like 2 or 3 minutes, but we're live. And so I'm just going to show you exactly what it would look like if it was to run. And we'll go back later so I'm not lying. So basically, if we open up our task here for our AI content summaries feature, here is our brief, as you've already seen. But now we have some new subtasks here. We have a subtask per deliverable. So whenever I filled in the form, I asked it for, I think, a blog and email copy. And so we have one for each of those, and we have a human that's been assigned to review that drafted content. So Matthias has a responsibility to come in here. It's an approval task, so you can see here that Matthias has an option to either approve it, request changes, or reject it. And when he opens up that subtask, this is where the content is. So AI generated content, this is it. This is the, in this case, the email blast. So we have the subject line, the header, copy of the email. So Maddie can come in here, take a look at it, approve it, and then move on to the next step, maybe go live with it or whatever. The way that this process would work is like, this is one request, and it would move down into the active campaign section. And that's where it might become its own project, and not just a task, but its own project with multiple different sections and lots of things to do. The point is that AI is giving you guys a head start. It's giving your writers a head start. And so you can have something to work from with all the information you've already provided it. One thing I want to mention here is that I'm representing human inputs with purple, and then I'm representing AI outputs with blue. But there's also a way to make this process even more easy for your team, because I don't actually like the idea of having humans having to input this stuff in the form twice. The question that I want to ask is, how can we change this process to have AI help us not only with the outputs here, but also with our inputs? So maybe, when we submit this campaign request and we have to maybe we've got 10 questions to answer, it's possible that we can actually use AI to answer half of them, or to answer 3 or 4 of those questions by doing a web search or pulling that information in from somewhere else in your Asana instance. But in any case, this is good, and this would be even better to have these become less of a human needing to do it and more of an AI needing to do it, which would just allow you guys more time and more headspace and all that kind of stuff. So that is the first workflow, which is using AI to generate your content. So yeah, again, the topic was process police, and I want you to imagine that you are in a company that does things. And so if you're doing that and you're in a company that does things, and you probably have processes to follow, right? When you do something, you have rules about how that something gets done and who does that and when they do that. That's a process. And sometimes process compliance with your team, whether you're on the receiving end of not doing a process right, or you're on the giving end of slapping wrists when processes don't get followed, it isn't that fun. And encouraging process compliance can be a bit cumbersome. And it's kind of a vibe killer in some ways, right? Like remember to do this again and again and again. And I can think of scenarios where I was in the receiving end of that. And for whatever reason, I couldn't remember to do that one thing after a client call. And so I had a thought to myself, like, how can we encourage process compliance through something that's friendly and not a vibe killer, but makes me remember it for the next time? And that's where I thought of this kind of like friendly roasting or public shaming of people who don't follow processes. And that might be a bit harsh, so just bear with me. I'm a nice person, I swear. Um, Imagine you are in a company and you're doing this work, and this is how your client projects look, where you've got like onboarding tasks to do for a project, and then you've got like your client calls that you're working on, and then you've got like your backlog tasks, and this is where a project will get done. And now imagine that you're Jamie and you're doing calls for clients, but you have a process to follow where after you host a call, you always paste the transcript of that call in the comment section of that task. That's the process for you to follow. Everybody knows it, but you never get it right. Or sometimes you forget. What's a way that we can encourage Jamie to remember that and to be a bit playful? And the answer is through Asana AI. So I've created a rule here where if a call task gets completed that doesn't have a transcript pasted in the comment section down here, then it's going to run a rule that actually connects to Slack. And it's going to basically publicly shame Jamie for not following the rules. But it's really playful. So I'll show you the rule in the back end and then we'll run it together. So if I go to the Customize tab here on this project, and then I go to our rules, here's my rule for public shaming in Slack. And you're actually going to find this familiar because Marquis showed you this external connection earlier on today's call, where you can send a channel message in Slack based on a trigger from Asana. This rule says that when a task gets completed, check if that task is a client call. And the way we define that is by being in the section client calls. And if it is, and there is not a transcript that's been commented on the task, which is our AI condition, then let's send a message into our Slack channel to basically say, hey, ladies and gentlemen, we have, a process breach has been detected. This person, again, has not followed the process. It's very, light. The audit logs are judging you. The process police are watching. Let's light a candle for the process discipline and hope this never happens again. Like, this is pretty cute. It's pretty funny. I think I'll pat myself on the back for that. But I think importantly, like it's something that I think Jamie wouldn't forget. Jamie's colleagues would have really fun poking fun at her for this, while also encouraging actually doing the process. But it's not as boring as saying like, hey, Jamie, please follow this process because it's not going to be remembered in that way. And so I like the idea of having something playful like this installed into maybe your templates. And so let's see this in action. If I'm Jamie and I just completed a discovery call for a client, I'll go ahead and I will press complete. And as you know, the comment section right now is blank. There's no way that I've posted a transcript here. So what should happen is AI should check for that. And if it sees that there's no transcript, it's going to send a message to our Slack channel. You can see here that we're reviewing the task, looking at the task, discovery calls have been completed. However, there's no transcript. Therefore, I'm going to run that rule. And so in the background now, it's running the rule, which is basically connecting the Slack and sending a message through into our environment. And I'll show you our Slack without I'm trying not to leak any information here. Here is our testing integration section that I've hooked it up with. And here is the message that you might have seen from our rule. There's a process breach, process police are watching you. Please be careful and make sure that you're following the process whenever you have a call. Perform the sacred ritual by reopening the task, pasting in the transcript, and then completing the task again. And so, yeah, that's basically it in process. Again, I've been on the receiving end of this too many times because it's so easy to forget things like this. And so I'd recommend installing something like this in your environment if you want to get playful with it.